Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden. There is something that a lot of really great minds did that a lot of people don't know about. And I'm going to introduce you to the real DaVinci Code. Around the 15th century, when Da Vinci became a Renaissance man, and that's really key to this whole story, he discovered something. And it was not safe in the 1500s, 1600s to publicize what he found. In fact, there's a long history of if you talk about this, you end up dead. So instead, he hid it. He followed tradition, you might say, and he embedded it inside of his artwork. But it takes a Renaissance man to be able to read all of it. Around that same year, two other people figured it out. Their names were Miguel de Cervantes and William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare figured the same thing out, made the same realizations, and he wrote a whole lot of plays and embedded the same stuff inside of his. And Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, and he embedded it inside as well. It was the exact same message, translated, embedded, and passed down to the next generation. From the 1500s to about 1970s, it fell into the hands of a certain someone by the name of Douglas Adams, who also made a point of deciphering the exact same code, figured it out, and he had a choice. Is it free to talk about it or embed it back inside of a book? 1970s, you embed it. So he embedded it inside of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and the other 4 Hitchhiker's Guides books. He came up with the word 42. That was incorrect. It's 44. But once you fix that problem, you can actually decipher the code that he left you. I'm going to say again, it's 44, not 42. I made the same mathematical error. So then I decoded it, and when I decoded it, I found the exact same answer, solution, everything, and went, well, now what do I do with it? Same problem, same question that Da Vinci had. Do you talk about it or do you embed it? I decided it was safe enough to talk about it. So this is what we're going to talk about. The academic disciplines, all 18 of them, are used as decoders. You have to do all 18 disciplines in order to figure out the complete code. Once you decipher, once you have all 18 disciplines, you can then decipher the code. The code goes all the way back to 700 BCE by the name of Zarathustra. Philosophy, when it's done the esoteric way, so we're going to call this esoteric philosophy. Esoteric philosophy is the entire instruction manual to allow you to see what this is. Now I'm going to translate why this is so important to a teacher. Because when you go through this, the esoteric philosophy reveals something. It reveals that the purpose to life, the universe, and everything, Douglas Adams, actually is the discovery and the adventure of 2 timelines. The first timeline is nature's timeline. It's actually her storyline. The second timeline that runs parallel to nature's timeline is your own timeline. Now, going into René Descartes in the 1500s, he came up with something called the Cartesian coordinate system, which means in order to get a triangulated position, you require a point of origin and you also require a destination. I'm going to show you this. Nature's storyline is your origin, and the self storyline is your destination. Well, look at that. Now you have 2 points in which to triangulate your position in your own growth. This is the purpose of education. Plato and Pythagoras knew this. They embedded this inside of the esoteric philosophies. Unfortunately, esoteric means inside, so you have to be inside of philosophy in order to even understand this. But everybody else, especially the Romans, were exoteric, which meant on the outside. So they saw something, they didn't understand what they saw, and they translated it into what they thought was going on, and then they promptly destroyed all of the educational system in the 4th century. It actually took closer to 800 years to accomplish. From the moment Socrates' trial to the destruction of the 2 philosophical schools in Athens, Plato's school and Plato's school was academia, and the Lyceum, which was Aristotle's school, both of which were destroyed in Athens. I believe it was around 700 BCE. And then, of course, there's the execution of Christ, another philosopher who was killed around the turn of the century. And then let's fast forward to around the 4th century, 380 specifically, 380 CE, when all of Alexandria was destroyed, including the Library of Alexandria, the museum, and the philosophical university there. So that by the end of the 4th century, there were no good schools. Just to kind of make sure the job was done properly, about 50 years later, the Roman Church sent St. Patrick to Ireland to take out the Druid school. St. Patrick knew what they were doing, and he preserved them instead, keeping them safe and alive with their educational system well into the 1600s. When the Holy Roman Empire discovered this, they then went in and committed an entire genocide of Ireland in the 1600s, which is well documented. We know this. It wasn't until the first university came out in 1088 CE. I've seen some dates distinguish this. There's some that came out in the 800s. It's all over the place. This is where history gets a little muddled, which happens a lot when you have shit to cover up. So what ended up happening is a university in Bologna, Italy, was finally erected because, according to the stories, there was a king who said, "I am above the grammar." And somebody said, "Oh, wow, education really is important after all. Maybe we should do something." But they didn't know what they were doing because they were exoteric. They killed everyone who was esoteric. But fortunately, one of the studies in esoteric philosophy is the study of the universal clock. The universal clock is what the Mayans had. It's how they were able to create their calendar. And in esoteric philosophy, it's one of the things we study. So when you're looking at the esoteric philosophies, you know exactly how to build and read the universal clock. The universal clock allows you to predict mathematically using projection and accuracy who's going to do what, where, and when. So let's just say the philosophers saw this coming. That is when they created the genius game. The genius game is an advanced for philosophers only that they embedded inside of all of education around 700 BCE when they realized how shit was going to go down. And sure enough, all the philosophers, knowing all of this, took the effort to make sure that the esoteric sciences were properly preserved inside of philosophy. But you have to go inside of philosophy to find it. Not very many people do that. Most people study it as an exoteric study, which is the problem. DaVinci studied it as an esoteric science, as did Cervantes and Shakespeare. When you study the esoteric science inside of philosophy, it unlocks the genius game so you can decode it properly and you can figure out what's going on because you gain access to the universal clock, and then you can read it and go, "Oh my God, okay, now what do I do?" And then you've got the choice of whether or not it's safe to bring it out or not. It is safe to bring it out. In fact, this is inside the universal clock and we're all well aware of it who play the game. So this is where you come in as a teacher. Human beings are naturally curious. They're naturally discoverers. They're explorers. We all are Charles Hudson. We all are Magellan. I remember so strongly in the movie The Truman Show, when Truman stands up and he says, "I want to be an explorer like Magellan." And the teacher said, "Oh, you're too late. Everything's been explored. Too bad." No. This is the purpose of the genius game, because every one of us is a Sherlock Holmes. And that is going to be every teacher's gem is this right here, because we're all born with it. It's our curiosity. It's our wonderment. Every one of us is driven to this. And children have that natural curiosity, wonderment. Now, let's play off into that gorgeous nerd brain that so many of us have that we're not allowed to talk about, is how awesome this Easter egg hunt, and it is the world's largest Easter egg hunt. It is the granddaddy of all Easter egg hunts that's been buried over 2,000 years inside of every academia you can possibly think of. If you are a musician, you can see it in music. If you are a philosopher, you can see it in everything. If you are a biologist, you can see it in biology. This is what the Fibonacci sequence is. So as you start to learn this stuff, you start to realize that the 18 academic disciplines are the 18 languages of Mother Nature that the geniuses used to integrate a beautiful code in 18 parts inside of all of their artwork. That's right. And we get to say to all of the children in all of the world, go Easter egg hunting. Now, how is that for an incentive to learn? Now, what they're really going to be doing is three things. One, there's going to be the granddaddy of all Easter egg hunts. Two, they're actually studying Mother Nature's storyline, which they need for their point of origin, because that is where we all come from, Mother Nature. Three, they're going to be discovering themselves as well, which means all of this is relative to them, and now they're going to know who they are. So you have a 5-year-old who walks into your classroom, and that child doesn't know who they are. Well, that's the point. This is the learning journey of the discovered self. You have to go into the disciplines to learn the languages of the disciplines so you can apply the disciplines to the Easter egg hunt. And while you're doing that, you are going to discover who you are and what your origin is. So you now have relativity on who and what you are. You cannot ask for a better solution for an academic discipline than this. Now, Pythagoras and Plato already knew this because they're the ones who invented it and embedded it in history, and it's already there. So all you have to do is become aware of it. It's called metacognitive awareness. We're going to be covering this a lot. So you can then pass this down into other generations. Now, the biggest thing that a lot of people come up with when they hear about this is, how am I going to learn all of the disciplines in all of my life? I can't even do 2. That's not true. That is an exoteric point of view. When you're an esoteric scientist, you know how to do it in 2 years, which is how I did it, which is how DaVinci did it. When you're an exoteric, you think things like, well, jack of all trades, master of none. When you're an esoteric, you're a master of everything, and you become a philosopher of all. They just don't know how to do it because they're exoterics. So the big thing we're going to be doing inside the Healing Garden is taking you from the exoteric world into the esoteric world. This is a world that has been closed off for over 2,000 years. It is what Pythagoras and Plato intended philosophy to be used as. And it's a completely different world. This is the ancient Greek educational system. And this is truly what was lost to us in the 4th century. Now, this is why it was lost to us in the 4th century, is because the information that is inside the esoteric sciences, some people are will think, the exoterics will think that it's dangerous knowledge. But here's the kicker. The exoterics already have this information and they've weaponized it. That's the problem. Alexander the Great studied with Aristotle for 14 years, and then he worked for Rome and secured all of the Roman Empire for the Caesar family. He took the information out of the esoteric sciences and he weaponized it. And then he literally handed it over to the Caesar family, which is how everything unfolded the way it did. So it's not a question of, is this powerful? Yes. Is this going to fall into the wrong hands? It already has. Is this dangerous? Ignorance is dangerous. Ignorance of it is what's dangerous. And that is the moral of the story that we needed to learn over the last 2,000 years, is that ignorance is dangerous. Within the esoteric sciences, it's not possible to learn this information without the ethics. It's just not. You are supposed to learn this information in likeness of the ethics. In fact, that's how you unlock it. Now, I've been struggling for this for a while, is how did Alexander the Great do this if also he was unethical? because he was able to get his hands on the universal world clock. Now, he didn't know how to read the clock, but he was able to gain access to it. And this is all in books. We know this. This was all written down. And once you know how to read the Mayan calendar, you can build it yourself, you can put it together, and you can translate it all beautifully. It's the universal clock. So he was able to make calculations based off of this really amazing book he had. And that's it. You know, in Back to the Future, you know, with Biff in the book. So let me translate that for you. You see, Stephen Sondheim studied the esoteric sciences. And when he started to write his movies, he went, all right, I figured out the code. Is it safe? It's not safe. I know, I'll put it into movies. So there's a lot of our movies that have this. Stephen Moffat has it. Stephen Moffat has it. Back to the Future is literally the story inside of Back to the Future. It is, Biff is actually Alexander the Great and the Roman Empire. Really cool. And the almanac is the world clock. Yeah, it's this information. And if you noticed, Marty McFly, I'm either Doc or I'm Marty, and I haven't figured out which one yet, had to go back in time, get the almanac from Alexander the Great, and stop all this from happening. So it's not a question of whether or not this information is dangerous. It's not. Ignorance of it is dangerous. And that's why it is so important that you pass this on to all the generations in the future. That is why. Because we cannot ever forget this again, because that's what's dangerous. So, we're going to be teaching you the game. It is the real DaVinci Code. We're going to be teaching you how to teach it. We're going to be teaching you how to maneuver and navigate inside the esoteric sciences. It is a completely different world. We're going to be teaching you the language and the philosophy of the esoteric sciences. That way, you have the ability to step outside of the exoteric world into the esoteric world. But you're going to need a guide. You're going to need a tour. Now, all of my science, all of my information, every word out of my mouth is 100% pure of the esoteric sciences. It's all I do. I grew up inside of them. I'm a fluke. I have the formula. I'm a fluke. So I grew up inside of the esoteric sciences, while everyone else grew up on the exoteric side. It took me a very, very long time to figure this out, crack the code, and then be able to translate this to all of you, because I grew up inside the esoteric sciences, where everybody else grew up on the outside. So I'm going to be taking you into my world now and breaking down this language and showing you what Pythagoras and Plato really built and why and what it does. And it's not, well, in simplicity, there is truth. And it is very simple. I would predict it takes approximately 2 years. And that 2 years, it's a lot of information, but it's simple, it's clean. And I do believe you'll become a master of all of it in 2 years. Now, while you learn the esoteric sciences, you're also going to be studying the 18 disciplines. Now, one of the big things is you recognizing your own resources that you already have. And because you haven't studied the esoteric sciences, you don't see a lot of what's already available to you. So do not get discouraged. Do not get disheartened. Do not think, oh my God, that's so much information. This is not information. This is nutritional knowledge. And in the esoteric sciences, you are going to learn that there is a big difference between information and nutritional knowledge. And that's something we also teach here in the esoteric sciences. So, welcome to the Healing Garden. And thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.